Hey, I'm Greg Pollock, and you're watching the #1 strategy for creating effective technical video. And this is a talk, honestly, I gave about a year and a half ago, and I'm just now getting around to putting it on video. So if it's a little rusty, I'm just letting you know that up front. Here we go. When it comes to developer learning preference, I want you to make sure that you understand why creating effective technical video is important. We surveyed about 249 developers, asked them which of these 3 resources are the most useful to you when beginning to learn a new technology of your own. And you can play along at home if you'd like. Text tutorials, published books, or video tutorials. Well, 9% said published books, 40% said text tutorials, 51% said video tutorials. Yeah, we forced them to pick one. And so it kind of goes to show you, right, that it's pretty important. Why should you care? Because when it comes to learning new technologies, 73% of developers look for high-quality video tutorials. So it's important to have them out there. All right, and just to prove the point even more, we worked with Bulma to create a video for them on the front page, and then we looked at the analytics, at the actual data. And what we found was 13.5% of new visitors hit play on that video. Those people who hit play stayed on the website 155% longer than those that didn't, and they also visited more pages and spent more time per page. We did the same thing with Vue.js, and this is old data, but with 2 weeks of data, what we found was 21% of new visitors who visited the front page hit play, and those new visitors stayed 151% longer, and visited more pages, right? And then even if we take a look at their behavior over time, we find that the people who watch the video are more likely to visit the website than those who didn't. So, video is important. Obviously, good documentation is also very important when teaching technology, but video is also really up there. Of course, the problem here is that most online video tutorials are not great. They are boring, they put you to sleep, they just are, watching somebody code, and, maybe you already create some of these. Maybe some of you already do. And the goal for this, of course, is to show you how to create the best or better video programming tutorial. So hopefully there'll be at least one thing you see in this video that is useful to you. But in order to figure out what are the best, maybe we should start by looking at not the best. As a developer, I've sat through some pretty awful programming tutorials. Bad videos can be pretty hard to create, so in this episode of Open Source Craft, I'm going to show you how to create the best, worst programming videos. First up, make sure you pick a good location. Like here, in the bathroom. The acoustics are wonderful. I love my squatty potty. The closet works too. It's important that there's lots of things in the background to entertain your watchers. That's just creepy. When you switch to screencast mode, same deal. You want to make sure all the windows needed to understand the technology are there. Leave nothing out. Pay no attention to this one over here. Also make sure to show the entire app at once, preferably in a single window. You may need to shrink your font a little bit to make that happen. Talking about text editors, be sure you use a font color that really stands out. You'll want your audience to pay attention. When it comes to lighting, you'll want to stick to the extremes. Either outside with a nice view behind you, or better yet, in the dark. Nobody really wants to see you anyways. And if you do film in the dark, make sure you use a soft, creepy, intimate voice. So your watchers feel like you're right there, watching them code. It's not creepy, it's friendly.
Okay.
Let's talk about slides. Slides can be great to emphasize a point. Just be sure to use enough of them, otherwise you might leave something out. Seriously, I mean it. Also be sure to pick a font that breeds trust, like Comic Sans. It's the only way to go, unless you're using Ruby. With Ruby, you always want to use Papyrus. It's important. Also, since visual learning is the reason you're creating videos, you're going to want to make sure you include a lot of diagrams. As you can see with this one, the cloud service can auto-deploy the blockchain.
Like, awesome!
As I mentioned, the objective for this video is to teach you some easy techniques you can follow to create the best video tutorials. Not the best worst, but the best best. All right, so who am I? My name is Greg Pollock. I created this company called Code School. Right now, I'm working at a company called View Mastery, and I teach a lot of students at both of these. To create this slide deck, I consulted some of the best technical teachers that I know on the internet to get some of their advice, and we'll be consulting them as we go through this presentation. So we're going to go through 5 categories of awesomeness. We'll look at tools, instructional design, filming your desktop, your delivery, and good old customer service. All right, so let's dive into it. But first, the disclaimer, I'm a bit, maybe a little more than a bit, of a perfectionist when it comes to creating online content. So don't feel like you have to do all of these things. If you're doing just a few, you'll be fine. First of all, let's dive into tools. And Peter Bell says bad audio is much more distracting than low quality video. And it is so true. You can get away with bad video as long as your audio is really good. So what do you need to do for that? Well, get yourself a good microphone. You can get a USB microphone like this one, and then you just want to position it just maybe a little bit out of the frame so that the users don't see it. Because yeah, it's not good if they see it. Or you can do what I do, which is get a lavalier microphone. So what I'm doing, in case you're wondering right now, is I've got a pretty good quality camera here. I'm recording the audio, it's coming lavaliers attached to the camera, and then I'm playing the slides on a monitor over here. So that's why you'll see me sometimes look over here. I'm also recording this screen that I'm playing the slides on. Here, let me just show you real quick. So over here, I've got the slides right here, and I'm recording audio off of that computer as well, so that I can send this video and that video to an editor to put them together. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to find an editor later. Before you invest in the camera, another thing you can do, man, these iPhones come with great cameras as well. And you can order online a lavalier microphone that goes right here like this one that wires into your iPhone, and maybe a stand too. Then you can put it up and just record off of your iPhone. The video is pretty awesome. Next, I highly recommend filming yourself, like I'm filming me right now, rather than just having a disembodied voice. I like to watch videos with humans, not disembodied voices. So I highly recommend you come on the screen, even if you're in a square bubble. And it's best to do this when you're explaining ideas. If I'm going to tell a story or explain an idea or a theory, that's when it's best to come on screen. Obviously, don't be on screen the whole time. Go off the screen when you want someone to focus just on the code. You don't need to be on there the whole time. Next, you can either buy lighting or you can do what I do, which is set up opposite a window. I've got a big window over here that gives me plenty of light, and thus I've never had to invest in lighting, because I'm always setting up opposite a video. Hopefully you can do that in your home too. This is even what I would do when I'd go and interview people. I would just find a big window and set up opposite that, and it gave me plenty of natural light. When you're filming yourself, also find a good backdrop. Make it look interesting. Like I've got my big column in the background. Honest to God, at Code School, we had a teacher once, or really like a screencast teacher, that sent us a video. She must have been in her bathroom. She was recording in her bathroom. It was echoey. It had tile. Not pretty. So if you have a messy room, clean it up, make it look a little more professional. Or even you can invest in like a curtain. You can just hang cloth. I highly recommend investing in a good screencast editor if you're producing them all yourself. Something like ScreenFlow. I still love ScreenFlow to capture my desktop. That's actually what I'm using right now to also capture my slides. You can use Snagit or even Camtasia Studio if you're on Windows, because ScreenFlow is just for the Mac. When you're capturing your screen using one of these tools, I highly recommend using a Retina screen or a high-resolution screen. That way, when you zoom in, things don't look pixelated like this. If you want to create more professional screencasts and maybe even go in front of a green screen to do them like this, like I used to do on Code School, you might want to go on to Craigslist and say, hey, I'm looking for somebody who can do film editing in front of a green screen, and maybe you have access to a studio where I could go and film in front of the green screen and lighting, which you're going to need if you're doing green screen stuff, and send me a demo of you already doing this. Then you can find local independent filmmakers that are able to do this for you, and that's going to be the cheapest way to get it done. If you go to a film studio, it's going to be too expensive. You're best off finding a local contractor who can just do all the work single-handedly, has the camera, has everything you need. If you want it to look more professional, you can go two ways. You can go with the green screen, as I mentioned before, and you can honestly do that all yourself if you want to learn. If you Google around online, you'll find how to build your own green screen. The first one I did, I went to Home Depot, I bought some PVC piping, I went to the fabric store, I bought the greenest green I could find, and I put it all together, and I had my own portable green screen, and I got the lighting, also I think from Home Depot, and just set it up. There's ways you can do it on a budget if you Google around. At Code School, here's what things kind of look like behind the scenes. We had a room, we painted the backdrop of the room all green, we had lighting, but at that point we had a full-time film producer. When I produce technical screencasts, I use a lot of slides, and I use Keynote on the Mac. I think it's great. You can also use PowerPoint, but I wouldn't know where to start. Let me show you what Keynote looks like. So here you can see I'm in a slide, and on the right-hand side here, I've got the build order. So those are all my animations for this slide, right? So I can click and I can preview what that looks like. And there's lots of things you can do. You know, I have things coming in, I have things going up. What we did with Code School is I would just export that under QuickTime, self-playing. And so I would export the slides with the animations, and I would leave it up to the editor to time it all out. However, as I showed you a minute ago, these days I record what's on this video screen, which gets the audio here so that my editor can sync it all up. I think it's a more efficient way to do things. I'm capturing in ScreenFlow, and when I'm done, I'll export that as a 1080p video and send that to my editor along with what's on this camera right here. The editor will edit out all my screw-ups and make it look all nice. He'll then upload it to Vimeo, which has an amazing review tool. So I can use the review tool to give my editor notes of like, make this shorter, make it longer. That's also really useful. Here's what the finished product would look like.
Already know one. A component is a kind of directive with a template.
It gives you an idea what the finished product would look like at Code School. Another thing I experimented with is going full screen video with Keynote slides over it. So here's what my Keynote would look like on the left. I would simply have this bright green background, and then I would key out that green background to overlay it onto the video. Keynote has some tools itself to remove the green and do the chroma key. You can learn that. Or what I've taught myself over the years is I'll jump into something like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut. Shouldn't take you too long as an engineer to figure out those tools if you want to get into video editing, although it is a bit of a rabbit hole. If you can afford to pay a contractor a couple $100s to do your editing, I highly recommend it. I also recommend using animations wherever at all possible. Anybody who's ever worked with me knows that I am a Keynote guru. I could easily do like an hour-long presentation on how to do Keynote animations. There's a whole science behind it. But that's what allowed us at Code School and allows me at ViewMastery to create these sophisticated animations to teach very complex topics. You also want to get your videos captioned. This is not only important for people that are hard of hearing or deaf, but it's also important for people who have English as a second or third language. They're going to turn on those captions so they can follow along. You can use services like Rev. Right now we use rev.com, and they have a really great interface with lots of video hosting platforms like Vimeo. We use Vimeo. And so I go into Rev and I select the video I want captioned in there because it has an API, and it automatically goes and gets it and then automatically uploads it into Vimeo. It's a really easy process, and they only charge like $1 a minute. All right, so we're done with tools. Now let's go into instructional design. This is, the science around teaching. Brad Schiff from Learn Web Code says, don't value the how over the why. When you're first explaining a topic, it's important to tell the viewers why they should care and what problem perhaps it solves. You can do this by describing the problem first. Don't just teach the syntax. For example, if I'm teaching the technology, I might say, here's the syntax for doing this, here's the syntax for that, here's the syntax for this. And it's going to be a boring video and not very useful. If I just wanted to learn the different syntaxes, I could read the documentation. So I first introduce a problem, and then go, how do we solve this? And then say, here's the syntax for solving this problem. Next, this might seem like common sense, but you'll be amazed at how many programming videos don't start out telling you what all they are going to teach. Especially if you have a longer video or if you're part of a course, start by saying what all you're going to cover. If at the end of your course you're going to build something together, also start out by showing them exactly what you're going to build by the end. Might look something like this. Brad Traversy from Traversy Media says, never assume the viewer has any previous knowledge of the technology. So if you assume they're going to know something, say it at the beginning of the video. Here in my Angular 2 course, we assume you knew basic JavaScript, basic HTML and CSS, and optionally knew some ES 2015. If you can use a visual to explain a concept, do it. For example, Babel transpiles. This means it gets changed into JavaScript. And TypeScript is the same way. TypeScript transpiles into JavaScript. If your solution has 3 steps, consider showing those 3 steps visually before you actually code it out. Also, it's important to show more than one example. So first I'll say, here's a problem we need to solve. Then I'll show how to solve it, teaching perhaps a new syntax. Then I'll introduce a different problem and show a different solution using the syntax. I find that one example usually isn't quite enough for me to really fully understand a new technology syntax. You can also use this as an opportunity to get the user to think. It's important to ask, what would you do? Or how do you think you would solve the problem? So here you might pause and say, hey, how might you think we would solve this with the syntax I just showed you? And then you show them. This also might sound obvious, but show the correct way first. I've fallen into this trap before, where I will show a solution and then go, you'd think this is the right way to solve it, but it's not. Oh, it drives me crazy. Because if you've shown me a problem and then you start showing me a solution, I expect you to show me the right way to solve it. Don't show me the wrong way to solve it. I don't want to know the wrong way to solve the problem. And so just start out by showing me the right way. If there's a pitfall, maybe show me afterwards, but first show me the right way. And also, if there's errors that a lot of people are going to run into in coding this technology, that's also a wonderful thing to teach. You could say, here's a common error you might run into. That can be so useful. Especially in longer videos, it's really important to have check-in points where you go back and you say, okay, let's take a look back at what we learned. Or you might say, all right, that concludes our section on this topic. Now we're going to learn this. It's that whole check-in point. Your listeners or your viewers are going to check out at certain points, and you give them a chance to check back in when you say, okay, let's go over what we just learned. All of a sudden they pay attention a little bit more. This is also important to do at the end of your video. Here's what it looked like at the end of my Angular 2 course. We learned we can use pipes to transform our template output. We learned how to create and use methods for our components. And here is what our current application structure looks like. Oh, look at those beautiful animations. Now to the next section. See what I did there? We're going to be looking at filming your desktop and certain lessons here. First of all, obviously, clean off your desktop. If you've got a bunch of icons on, get those off of there. There's different ways you can hide the icons on your desktop if you don't want to take the time to move them where they should be. And also, if you're showing your browser, hide those browser extensions. It just is cluttering up, doesn't look as professional. You're going to want to make sure that your fonts are bigger and you increase your browser size. Here's an example of something that is obviously too small. Here's something that is better. One thing I always remind myself is that there's going to be certain users that watch your screencast on a phone, like on an airplane, they downloaded it maybe. And so on this size screen, they need to be able to really easily watch it. And so I kind of designed for phones in mind. Next, you're going to want to use a good code-friendly font. This could be something like Monaco, or Anonymous Pro, or Inconsolata, or Source Code Pro. These are all great code-friendly fonts. Next, you're going to want to use an accessible color scheme, something like this, or like that. Some themes are just harder for people to read, especially if they might be colorblind. You want to have a high contrast ratio between the background color and the text so it's easily readable. Also, please use code highlighting. This code here is much less readable than this you see here. I love putting my code into slides, and if you're using VS Code, it makes it really easy to copy and paste out your code into slides. It basically copies in a rich text format. What I do is I copy out of VS Code, I bring it into a Mac app that gets shipped with all Macs called Text Edit. I paste it into there, and inside Text Edit, I remove the background color, and then I copy and paste it into Keynote, just so you know. It's also really powerful to show code side by side with the result, something like this. It sounds obvious, but it's surprising how many screencasts just show you code and never show you like the result. They kind of leave you hanging. It can be really powerful when you've got them side by side. The other thing to be careful about is switching windows too quickly when you're going back and forth between two different windows. Let me show you an example. So here you can see we're in our code, and I'm going to change my first website to Bulma to Greg. And you see how quickly I switched away from the editor to the browser? I didn't give you a chance to really see what I was doing. So you're going to want to pause there. So here you can see, like, I changed it to Greg, and I kept it there, and then I switched to the browser, and things were a lot more clear. So avoid switching windows too quickly. Finish typing, pause for a second, and then switch windows. If you want to go the extra mile, show your students exactly where you want them to look. Let me show you an example here. So back in here, I'm going to change Bulma to Greg. Notice that call out? I'm just highlighting that part of the screen. And now when I go into my browser, notice the zoom. I'm zooming into where I want them to see it. And now I see my first website is Greg. Those two small things made a world of difference, didn't they? If you're doing a lot of mouse clicking because you're showing perhaps the user interface, well then show that click. And different screencasting applications make it so you can show a click. Let me show you an example here. Here I am designing a Tesla 2 years ago. So I click around, I drag, and notice that like radar is popping up. I also made my pointer bigger, I can tell here, to make it easier to watch. Also, if you're using a lot of desktop shortcuts, most of the screencasting applications allow you to display those. Let me show you what that might look like with ScreenFlow. You can see here my extra keys here. When I press Command and combinations, it's popping up in the bottom right of my screen when I do Command D. And then Command S for save. One thing John Papa recommended is to talk everything out loud. The viewers want to hear what you're thinking. So as you make decisions, talk about them out loud so they can learn from your thought process. It's really important to write out code one line at a time. I can't tell you how frustrating it is when some teacher pastes in a ton of code and you're like, what just happened? I would rather they give me it piece by piece, especially if you're using slides. So if I'm using slides, I might have this div, and first I do a H1 title, and then I do a subtitle, like so. And by animating one at a time, I can actually end up with a slide that's pretty complex, but because I animated them in a piece at a time, it's going to be more understandable. If you are using a camera, which I recommend, I don't recommend you put yourself on screen the entire time. When you want the user to be focused on the concept and the code, take yourself off the screen. Have them focused there and don't let them get distracted by your face. Come back on the screen when you're telling them stories or concepts or theories. Our next category to create the most effective technical screencasts are talking about delivery. First of all, be energetic. I would always notice I'd sometimes make this mistake of recording videos right after lunch. I would be sluggish, I'd be tired, and it would come across in my videos. So be energetic, be full of energy, not sluggish and slow and tired. Next, I always say, Act like you're happy to see them. Put a smile on your face. Before a video, you want to be welcoming. Somebody walks into your store. You want to say, hey, how you doing? Welcome in. How can I help you? That's a lot better than like, all right, in today's screencast, we're going to be talking about a raise. Right? Just not welcoming. Obviously, don't take it over the top, but just be like you're happy to see a friend that walked in the door. Also, you're going to want to speak a little more clearly than normal. I usually don't articulate this much when I talk, but when I start screencasting, I try to articulate my words. You're going to want to articulate a little bit more than you normally might. Also, you want to use a voice volume that's neither loud or too soft. I don't usually talk this loud. If you were in the room with me, I would have a much more calmer voice. I would be something like this. But I know if I talk a little bit louder, I'm able to enunciate my words a little bit more. It kind of depends on how you talk. Some people naturally have a quieter demeanor, so it's going to be even more important for you to talk louder so you articulate and you don't mumble some of your words. Peter Bell, a teacher I really respect, says, make sure that instead of just reciting facts or providing type-along instructions, that you provide a narrative context for your videos so people care about the information you're sharing. Personal stories are always the most entertaining. The more personal you can be in your videos, the more accessible you're going to be, the more likable you're going to be, the more entertaining it's going to be. This is a really long video. I don't make videos this long anymore. Usually they're like, 5 to 10 minutes max. So if you've gotten this far, well, good on you. Good job. Show that you care. Well, I just expressed that I care that you got this far. If you express care, what does it do? It motivates people to learn what you are teaching them. It keeps them engaged. If you struggled learning a topic, if you screwed up the first time learning it, be open about that. People love to hear about other people's screw-ups. It makes you real. It makes you vulnerable. They're going to be more likely to want to learn from you. Also, I encourage you to look somewhat professional. As much as I really do trust developers in t-shirts, if you're wearing something a little more professional, people are going to be more likely to receive you and listen to you as if you actually do know what you're talking about. It's kind of lame that it matters, but it does. I'm not a fan of people using teleprompters. When somebody is looking like slightly off camera and reading, I feel like I can see that they're doing that, and something about that feels less authentic. I do have notes. They're a little further off camera. Sometimes I look at this, I get ready to, okay, this is what I'm going to say, and then I go back to you and I pretend I'm talking to you. And I hope that comes off, I kind of know that comes off as more authentic rather than me reading. I would be hardcore about this back in the code school days. I didn't let anyone read because I know there's something about that comes off as less authentic. We're down to our last category, customer service. We're almost through it. You're doing so good. It's important that you show your viewers that you value their time. So one way to do that is to tell them roughly how long it's going to take. In 5 minutes, I'm going to show you how to do blah, blah, blah. It makes me more engaged to listen to you because I know, okay, I've got 5 minutes. I'll give you my attention. Ratchaversity said, do not be overly technical. Not everybody who watches your video is going to be a geek. Try to avoid using complex words and jargon. Also, he said, always create a video series course like you're being paid $100,000 for it. Quality, honestly, matters. Don't sacrifice quality. As much as it can get laughs, I would avoid using profanity. Some people are just going to think it makes you look less professional. This is also a cultural thing. In different cultures, if you're not wearing a nice button-up and you're swearing, well, they're just not going to watch you or take you seriously. If you have an intro video, keep it short. If you have one of those graphics and you're playing music like welcome to blah, 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 shouldn't be more than 3 seconds. And then the next 10 to 20 seconds should explain the problem you're solving immediately. Try to make sure your audio is at a consistent level. So one way I would do this is I'd go and watch a professionally produced video, and then I would go and watch my video at the same volume level and make sure they match up. If they don't, there's some adjustment that needs to get made. If you're working with a video editor, make sure they know how to polish your audio as well. You might want to ask for noise reduction and compression. Noise reduction is obvious. Compression, what that does is makes it so that your quietest moments get louder and your loudest moments get a little quieter. So everything that you're doing is at roughly the same volume. If you're teaching a technology that can be installed in multiple platforms, either teach it for those multiple platforms or not at all, right? It's not nice to show favoritism, and you'll turn away users that might want to learn, but they're on a platform you didn't show how to install the tool on. So you can teach them all maybe in different videos, or you can just say, go to this webpage to learn how to install this application. If you care about your students, you should tell them where to go next to continue on their learning path, even if it's not on your platform. We would do this all the time at Code School. We would teach a concept, and then at the end, we would think, where should I show them to go? Even if it's not on my platform, I don't care. I want them to keep on learning. I want them to see that I care more about them mastering the subject than I do about keeping them on my platform. So I'm going to tell them all the best resources to continue learning. Technology moves fast, and so if you produce a video in version 1.0, you should also tell people this version was produced using version 1.0. And as the versions get updated, you should probably go back and update the video or not. You can also go into the notes underneath the video and just say, FYI, what I teach in this video has been updated. Or if you're using Vimeo or even YouTube, you can have tags, right, or comments in the video. So you can say hey, this has been updated. Try to keep it updated, or at least tell people this video was produced for this version of this technology. All right, there you have it. 5 categories of awesome on how to make the best technical tutorials. And keep in mind, you don't have to do all of these things. If you're doing just a few of them, you'll probably create better material than most people out there. And lastly, I hope you enjoyed this video. We are now friends, which means you can add me on LinkedIn. But there is a small friend tax, which means that you may someday get an email from me. Just small, polite email telling you what I've been up to. But feel free to add me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, and I teach Vue.js over on viewmastery.com. If you want to see some examples of all of these tools in action, maybe not all of them, but most of them, go to viewmastery.com. We have a ton of free content over there, and you can also download the slides. And if you have any additional things that you use to create amazing technical video screencasts, I would love to hear about them in the show notes or the comments, whatever they're called. And thanks for watching.